some of the issues that we've covered around here for quite a while, the main one is, especially in manufacturing, is a skills gap. You know, there's people out there looking for work. Of course, unemployment is trending slowly downward, but there's still that employers. We were here for a feature on them last year, looking for people that can do the job. On a federal level, what are some of the things that that government can do to help companies like this size?
I would say that it's really not much of a job of the federal government, and what we've tried to do, we haven't done a very good job. You know, from my standpoint, again, I know something a little bit about manufacturing, having been in the field for 31 years. It's been difficult to find people that are willing to work in a manufacturing plant for at least 20 years, regardless of the economic conditions. I would put two causes for it. You know, first, we are telling our young people, as they graduate from high school, you have to go on to college, you have to get a 4-year degree. We're denigrating the trades. I think that's very wrong-headed. I think it's the wrong message to send. From my standpoint, all work has value. We need carpenters, we need electricians, we need plumbers, we need people willing to work in manufacturing plants. And so certainly what I did before I ever entered this job is I was involved in the education system in Oshkosh, and we first did a program in terms of life skills and financial literacy, but then our next effort was Next Step After High School, where we were attempting to provide students and their parents all the options that they have after high school. You know, sure, if you want a 4-year degree, if you understand what it is you want to get educated in college, that's great. And we want to make those opportunities available, but a two-year associate degree is certainly something to pursue, or a technical college, or military service, or if you really don't know what you want to do, why don't you start working? Why don't you come into a manufacturing facility? So many companies will actually pay for your continuing education, and you'll get a work ethic. You won't get into debt. You'll actually be able to save money. So we really need to start talking to our young people about manufacturing is a very valid career option. There's not a first or second class way to realize your full human potential. All work has value. That ought to be our message to our young people. And then secondly, we have a real problem in this country when it comes to continuing to extend unemployment benefits. Now we're almost 5 years into recovery. I talk to employers all the time that cannot hire people back. For example, there was a painting contractor. I won't mention the city, but he finally got 2 big jobs. Went back to hire his crew. To a person, they wouldn't come back to work, and they're very honest as well. Until our unemployment benefits run out, just doesn't pay. Now, to add insult to injury, that painting contractor lost those 2 jobs. Guess to who? Those very same workers who did the jobs for cash. And that is just one anecdotal story among dozens that I've heard where people simply will not come back to work until their unemployment benefits run out. So it's sure, is there a skills gap? That's part of the problem. But I think it's just more a willingness to work gap and a willingness to work in manufacturing because, again, the signal to our young people is, boy, factory work, that's that's kind of a lower grade way to earn a living, or being a plumber lecturer. Nothing could be more wrong than that.
Okay, kind of going off the unemployment thing. Unemployment isn't a ton of money, and if people are willing to stay on unemployment rather than work, they're obviously don't think they can make a ton of money at those jobs. And we've seen certainly wage stagnation, probably more so in retail than in manufacturing. And of course, there's a great debate whether or not to raise the minimum wage or not, and all those issues are out there. What can, and again, from a federal standpoint, what can you do to help foster wage growth outside of, because Republicans certainly aren't going to push for a minimum wage.
Stop doing so many destructive things to economic growth. In other words, what we should be doing on a federal level is making America a more attractive place for business risk-taking, business investment, business expansion, job creation. If you really want higher wages, and I think we all do, what you want is a robust economy so you have employers competing for labor. And by the way, when you go through manufacturing plants, I'm always asking, what's your starting pay, what's your top scale? I rarely hear anything under $10 an hour. It's $11, $12 an hour, going up to $25 to $30 an hour. That's in manufacturing. So again, young people, there's some good paying jobs. The problem with President Obama's minimum wage proposal is that according to the Congressional Budget Office, 500,000 to 1 million people would lose their jobs. So it may sound good to raise everybody's pay up to $10.10 an hour, but if you're making $10.10 an hour and having 0 hours, that's not particularly good. It's not particularly helpful to those individuals that lose their
Right.
work. So when the government gets involved in the marketplace, there's some very serious negative unintended consequences, and those job losses are one of them. So again, if you want you want a stronger middle class, let's have a robust economy. And what we need to do is we need to get our tax system far more competitive. We're the highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. What we have going for us, we're the world's largest market.
Right.
And we have relatively cheap energy. Now, in manufacturing, I know manufacturers want to be close to the customers. It's a huge advantage. Cheap power is better than expensive power. If you want to manufacture things, you need power. So let's not artificially drive up the cost of energy, which is what we're doing in this country. And of course, our tax system is uncompetitive, and our regulatory system is onerous. So if, let's say you're an international manufacturer, want to come and manufacture close to the world's largest market here in North America, are you going to site your plant in Toronto with a 15% top tax rate, or Detroit at 35%?
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, it ends up being an obvious choice.
Right.
Do you want to subject yourself to a regulatory burden that costs, according to the Competitive Enterprise Institute, $1.8 trillion per year to comply with? Let me put that number in perspective. Only 10 economies in the world are larger than $1.8 trillion. That is what we are burdening our businesses and job creators with each and every year. So if we could get government less onerous, more competitive in terms of pro-growth tax reform, let's not artificially drive up the cost of power. I think we could have a manufacturing renaissance, and we could have significant wage growth, which we haven't had. I mean, median household income has declined during President Obama's weak recovery.
All right. Are we good? Two more quick ones?
Sure.
Let's talk about a little politics. It looks like the Republicans have a good chance to take the Senate, but that only gives you 2 out of 3 branches of government. How do you see the dynamic changing? Obviously, there's strong conservative legislation is still not going to make it past the White House. Yeah. But what do you see? What dynamic do you see changing there?
First of all, if Republicans regain the Senate, from my standpoint, I would actually be chairman of Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee. My approach would be to find those areas of agreement. What can we agree with our Democratic colleagues on type of regulations that are really hurting businesses in their states? Let's find the common ground. I mean, for example, 79 senators voted to repeal the medical device tax, which literally is driving medical device jobs overseas. Let's stop that. It's very destructive. It's really limiting medical device and certainly medical innovation in this country. So there's an area we should be able to agree on. I think it's questionable whether or not we would have a filibuster-proof majority to pass permitting the Keystone XL pipeline, constructing that. That would be private sector jobs, and also be one of those elements that would keep the cost of energy down. So there are a number of areas of agreement I think we can find. Harry Reid has just destroyed the world's greatest deliberative body. We've only voted on 23 amendments in over a year in the United States Senate. Now, that's how you debate in the Senate. You put a piece of legislation on the floor, and then every senator should have the right to offer an amendment and take a vote on it.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore because Harry Reid hasn't wanted to subject his Democratic colleagues to tough votes. I mean, I think that's crazy. So I really do think if we return to regular order, I think there's a logjam there. I think there are Democrat senators that aren't particularly, they're not happy with the fact that they can't offer amendments to improve a piece of legislation that might benefit their state, the people they represent. So I just really think there's a logjam there that could be broken, and if we conduct ourselves, certainly the way I want to conduct myself, and look for those areas of agreement. There's enough things we can do together that would help reduce regulations, potentially do pro-growth tax reform, not increase the price of energy. And we'll be able to find some common ground. It just takes a little effort to do so. Harry Reid hasn't been trying that. Everything he's put on the floor of the Senate has been very divisive.
All right, we'll go to international affairs. It did not sound like a good weekend in Iraq. ISIS is, I read, slowly around Baghdad. Do you think it's time? You've talked about in the past that should be an option, boots on the ground. Do you think it's time yet, or what are your thinking on that?
I agree with President Obama's stated goal that we have to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS. We need to degrade and ultimately destroy Islamic terror. Which we haven't done. They've been at war with us for more than 2 decades. We don't have an option whether we want to go to war. Our only option is, are we going to fight that war on the defense or go on the offense? If you stated the goal of destroying your enemy, you shouldn't be taking any options off the table that might be needed to achieve that goal. Now, realistically, in 2007 during the surge, to defeat 6,000 to 8,000 members of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, we had about 100,000 Sunnis that were working with us, about 100,000 Iraqi security forces. We had 160,000 American boots on the ground, 35 to 40,000 were involved in combat roles in that surge. That's what it took to defeat 6,000 to 8,000 members of Al-Qaeda. Now, because of the historic blunder of this president pulling out of Iraq, leaving no stabilizing force, the glue that bound that coalition together, ISIS was able to rise from the ashes of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now we're faced with a better organized, better equipped, better resourced, much larger force than ISIS. They are evil barbarians. You can't negotiate them. We're going to have to defeat them. But again, the lesson from the surge, when we had more than 300,000 boots on the ground, and half of that, almost half of those boots on the ground were the finest fighting force in the world, America. That's what it took to defeat a much smaller force. So I don't see how you you clear and hold. And the airstrikes are possibly holding back their advance. Doesn't sound like that's even working. I've heard inside the Pentagon that people planning these strikes are so underwhelmed by what President Obama is allowing. They're calling it shock and yawn, which is, again, doesn't give you a great deal of confidence they're going to actually accomplish the goal that President Obama himself stated.
All right, one last question. What do you hope to see or what do you hope to learn today during your visit here?
Well, again, I'm hoping to learn that you've got a business that, despite the problems, despite the regulatory burden and the tax burden, is still able to grow and succeed, and hopefully provide good paying jobs for the people that work here, that work with management and the owners.
Yeah, they've done a good job. We did a story last year during Manufacturing Day, and they always have the high school students in and do a pretty good program, and it's worked out pretty well. So
that's where this education really has to start in high school, where people, kids really do understand. Listen, you got a whole range of options here. I mean, so many kids are getting funneled into college, and they don't know what they're going to do there. They waste. I mean, let's face it, they waste the first year. They have a real good time, and they get in enormous debt holes. And that's not a good way to start your life. So take a little time, start working. You'll develop a work ethic, a discipline. If you decide to go to college, my guess is you'd be far more productive in college. You'd probably do a 4-year degree in 4 years. Or maybe even less. What a concept.